take a few of those calls. Delicate conversation with regard to some of the subject matter today. And we'll continue that subject, well, at least our subjects along those lines, for the next few minutes with our next guest, Robby Starbuck. Franklin Police Department is working to identify young children who potentially were drugged and sexually assaulted at the hands of an individual by the name of Camilo Campos, who has been a soccer coach in and around the Franklin, Tennessee area for the last 20 years. Campos has been held and charged with rape of a child and the sexual exploitation of a minor. Detectives are expected to file several additional charges against him in the coming days. Franklin police say they were contacted by a restaurant who found a cell phone, trying to find whose cell phone it was. They went inside the cell phone, and they found instead videos and photos of children in sexually exploitative positions. And obviously, the investigation immediately discovered hundreds of disturbing videos and images on the phone. They immediately arrested Campos, who recorded himself in most of these situations. That's all I'll say on the radio. It's all I can say on the radio. There's a little more detail if you want to seek it out, but I don't want to get too graphic or detailed. However, we will speak on this matter about what more can we do to protect our children with the one and only Robby Starbuck, who joins us on the show today. Hey, Robby, how are you?
I'm doing well. I wish I was joining under better circumstances, because this is just an absolutely monstrous, horrific story.
You know, I find it not the least bit ironic that in the same weekend that national leftist media was explaining to us how Sound of Freedom is a non-story, the movie doesn't really exist in the real world, the Rolling Stone article about the movie basically dismissed the concept of child sexual exploitation and child trafficking as a myth in the minds of right-wingers. And then you see this on the heels of some of that more ridiculous commentary about this movie. I mean, this is dramatic, it is evil, and it's right in our backyard, Robby.
Well, that's the thing people have to understand, is that this is a wake-up call. You know, a lot of people live thinking that, oh, we live in Franklin, we live in Williamson County, we're insulated from this stuff. We're not. There is nowhere in the country that is insulated from child exploitation or, unfortunately, even, you know, child rape, which is what we're dealing with in this case, you know. And so I think it's a real wake-up call to people that, you know, you've got to practice safety and prevention with your kids. You've got to let them know, you know, that there's not an appropriate situation to be alone with somebody like this guy, and that you've got to be proactive, and you can't just assume you're safe because you live in a nice area. You know, these people exist. They are out there. And if we don't have these conversations with kids, then they're not armed with the knowledge that certain things are not appropriate and that grooming does occur. And they should know what grooming looks like, that if an adult is constantly offering you things to make you feel special, and they're trying to get you alone or separate you from your parents or your siblings or your friends, that's not normal behavior, you know. And I think that education is so key. You know, my wife's organization, Freedom Forever, they do a lot of that to teach people, you know, what are these tools? How do you talk to your kids about this? And that's critical right now.
Well, and what more can we do as a society to encourage our elected leaders to do more? Is there anything more? I mean, I understand that we live in a free and open society, and sadly, it is very, very difficult to be right 100% of the time when faced with this type of evil. What more can the state of Tennessee do, if anything, Robby?
Yeah, there's a lot more we can do, and I've been in discussions with representatives, senators, you know, since this news broke, and even before that, because there was something even before this happened that we were working on, and that's that my wife and I have been trying to get a law passed here in Tennessee that will allow for the death penalty in cases like this. People will be surprised to find out that for child rape, you cannot get the death penalty. In fact, a lot of the country, child rapists get off very easily. There was a case in New York recently where a man was sentenced to 180 days in prison after raping a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old. That shouldn't be possible in the United States of America. You know, there's people who go to jail longer for marijuana. And so I think, you know, we've got to set a standard here, and we've got a great opportunity with our supermajority legislature to pass a law that sets the standard for the nation, that says we will not allow this type of, you know, monstrousness in our state. And if it happens, we are going to publicly deal with it in such a way that it puts fear in the hearts of predators. And I want predators to watch what we do in Tennessee and go, okay, you know what, I'm going somewhere else. And our kids here can be safer because of that. And so we can set that standard. We're going to do that. I mean, I'm going to use every ounce of political capital I have to make that happen. But then another thing we can do is make sure your friends know about this story in Middle Tennessee, because this guy, like you said, he was here 20 years. And a lot of these kids, unfortunately, will not even know that they were the victim of rape because they were unconscious in these videos that were found. And police have said that much, that they're afraid these kids don't even know. And so people need to know what this guy looks like, and they need to find out if their kids were ever around him. And Franklin Police has asked to please contact them if your kid ever had contact with this guy for any reason. Even if you think there was nothing weird about it, if they had contact with the guy, you should reach out, because there may be information that you have that you don't realize is important. So Franklin Police, their phone number is 615-794-2513. And if you're a family listening right now who knows that your kid did have contact with this guy and you don't know what to do or how to broach the subject with your kid, my wife's nonprofit Freedom Forever has established a crisis line that you can call, and they've got a crisis counselor who will help you with how to discuss this and help you get resources that you need, help you get in contact with the appropriate law enforcement. And that phone number is 615-307-0152. Or you can go to freedomforever.us and send an inquiry, you know, if you want to send by email instead. But that phone number for the crisis line is 615-307-0152. We can all do more, Matt, and I think that that's something that we've got to recognize. I've got all these people who will reach out on a regular basis and say, thank you so much for what you and your wife are doing. It's so brave. It's so this, it's so that. And it's not. That's the truth of it. Is it's actually kind of sad, because it's not that we're doing some great thing. I think we're just doing the duty that most parents have. Let's protect kids together. We can set the standard here in Tennessee and be the state everybody looks to and goes, hey, we want to be like that.
You know, this case, and I know it's early on in the discovery phase of how deep this rabbit hole goes, and we know that this individual was in Franklin for some 20 years, was a part of the community as a soccer coach, for goodness sake, which, so many parents give so much faith and trust into these types of individuals. It reminds me of a case that happened years ago in Birmingham with Don Corley, who was a very respected Boy Scout master, who was brutalizing young boys for years before one of the young boys finally came forward and grew the strength to tell his story, and that opened up the floodgates. And it shocked the Homewood community, which is similar in a lot of ways to Franklin. And I can't imagine some of the shock and disgust going on in Franklin right now to recognize that this individual spent so many years in the midst of their community and around their children.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking even for us. You know, we didn't interact with Coach Campos, but I have a kid in soccer out of our three kids. And, you know, knowing that this monster was so close to so many kids here in our community, and that he scouted at schools and playgrounds and recreational fields to go talk to kids alone and to try to get them onto teams where he could then lure them into this trap that he had set for these kids so that he could take advantage of them. It's as dark as it gets. You know, I don't think that there's a crime worse than doing this to a child. I think this is probably really the worst thing you could do. And so the community's got to grapple with that. And I think, you know, one of the things here about a case like this, I think is so important, is that we've got to unite on certain things. This is something that Democrats and Republicans can come together and do something good on. And I really hope that's what we see, is we see no politics here. Everybody bands together and says, we will go after predators. We will not allow this in our home. We will not allow this in our state. And we are going to set the worst consequences anybody's got for these monsters.
You know, you talk about things that could bring the country together, and one would think that this would be one of those things. Yet the political left pushes back more broadly. I read from a review that the Rolling Stone gave of Sound of Freedom. I just want to read you a portion of this review, Robby, and tell me how you respond to this, because it's almost as if an organization, leftist as they may be, like the Rolling Stone, takes a position that we are over-exaggerating child endangerment. We're over-exaggerating child trafficking. They said There's visible suffering all around us in America. There are poor and unhoused, people brutalized or killed by police. There are mass shootings, lack of health care, climate disasters. Yet over and over, the far right turns to these sordid fantasies about godless monsters hurting children. Now, as in the 1980s satanic panic, they won't even face the fact that most kids who suffered sexual abuse are harmed not by a shadowy figure or shadowy cabal of strangers, but at the hands of a family member. It's like they're dismissing that this is going on in our midst.
They're not the first to do it. And I mean, Rolling Stone is just a joke. I mean, this is our, quote, unbiased media. This is a place, they just ran a hit piece on me too, actually, a few weeks ago, where they called me an anti-trans activist because I don't want kids to get chopped up and mutilated at the doctor's office when they decide at 13 years old that they're confused about their gender, you know, so that makes me some kind of monster. I mean, these people are not rational. They're in no way connected to the actual roots of real America. And I think that's the thing people have to remind themselves. These are radicals. These are activists. These are not unbiased journalists. And, you know, when you look at the landscape of this, I asked myself a question this weekend when I saw these headlines, and I said, who benefits from these headlines and who likes these headlines? When you read a headline saying that child trafficking is essentially just some conspiracy theory and that it's not real, essentially, the only people I could think of who like that and would be happy about that headline are pedophiles and predators. I can't think of anybody else that would be happy with a headline like that, because even if you're an explicit partisan and you hate people like me and you're a leftist, you should still care more about kids than you do about your hate for me or hate for my party. And I think that's the thing that, like, people have got to get over here and realize that, hey, kids are not partisan. They're not Republican or Democrat. They're just kids. They're the innocent among us, and it's our job to protect the vulnerable and the innocent. And so if we can't band together and do that, I don't know how we're going to make it as a country as the, quote, United States of America. You know, it seems more like if we can't agree on something that simple, you know, we better start looking at the balkanization of the United States so we don't end up in a civil war, because it blows my mind. If we can't agree on that, we have some really, really serious problems.
Well, the same organization, like a Rolling Stone, that would dismiss the concept of child trafficking as a right-wing fantasy also defends child mutilation as, quote, life-saving surgery. I mean, these two things go hand in hand, which I don't know that they're necessarily conscious of how they're walking down this road side by side with one another. I'm just fascinated that the same organizations that would claim that child trafficking isn't really an issue would steadfastly defend the right of a parent to allow for their child to be mutilated along the lines that HB 1 in Tennessee would prevent. I'm sure you're ecstatic about the Sixth U.S. Circuit offering a defense of HB 1, are you not?
I am very, very, very happy with it. You know, we know that this law is going to hold up to scrutiny. We know that this is going to get appealed, by the way. They're going to appeal this. I've said from the very beginning, people can go back and check the tape. I've said from the start, this is going to the Supreme Court, and we are going to win at the Supreme Court and set a precedent that you cannot mutilate children in America, that these laws are absolutely constitutional, that states and our legislatures have the authority to dictate what is appropriate, what is not when it comes to these things. You know, because if we go under the left's premise, then genital mutilation as a whole is not something that we can pass a law and say, hey, we don't want that here. So if we can't pass a law saying that we can't have genital mutilation in our state, I mean, what control do we have to protect kids? And so, you know, I'm ecstatic with the decision. It's a very smart decision, too. It's close to 30 pages. I read it, and, I mean, it's legally so on point, and I think unassailable, that I can't imagine that we're not going to have great success at the Supreme Court when it does eventually get appealed to there, because you know, this is very simple stuff. I mean, it blows my mind sometimes. I feel like I woke up in a parallel universe, because 10 years ago we would have never had this discussion. The idea that it would be legal and popularized among one of the major parties in America to go and chop off children's body parts it's ludicrous. I mean, we would have all said that's crazy, and we would have been concerned about the mental health of the person saying it, but that is the reality we live in now. And so, you know, like I said, Rolling Stone is not an anomaly, okay? They were doing these stories. The Atlantic ran one about 2.5 years ago where they called child trafficking conspiracy theory. The LA Times ran a story, you know, 4 years ago, and my wife and I did the largest border march that there's been on our side. and we were exposing the child trafficking at the border there and the labor trafficking happening to children there. And the LA Times called it a conspiracy theory. This is not new. This is their playbook. And the problem for them is they're losing control. Things like social media. Let me point something out. This story about Camilo, Coach Campos, when it came out yesterday, I tweeted about it. I put it on Instagram and other places. There are over 3 million impressions on my account about this just in that brief period of time, of 3 million people that are sharing it and putting it places so that people get awareness of what's happening, can reach out to parents, find victims, right? And we've got the police phone number, all that stuff. Compare that to the legacy old media. If LA Times tries to not put this out, or let's say they do put it out, you know how many people on an average basis read a story from the LA Times? It's much smaller than 3 million. You know, CNN struggles to get 100,000 people to watch their channel at night during prime time. Okay, so this is something, social media changed the game and allowed for regular people to reach the masses and to make sure that the truth gets out there. And so the legacy media, as they're spinning and going through these death throes, you know, it's like a death rattle of the legacy media. This is going to be expected. They're going to do this more and more and make fools of themselves.
One more time, you mentioned your wife's website and a telephone number that people could call for resources available to them regarding speaking to their kids about these very delicate matters. Give us that one more time, Robby.
Yeah, so if you've come in contact with this coach at all, you know, really any association, and you need to talk to your kids about this and you're just not quite sure the right way to do it, or it feels weird, you can call 615-307-0152 or drop an email at freedomforever.us. They've got a crisis team who's willing to, you know, talk you through it. And if you're somebody whose child may have been a victim of this man, they will help you with resources and be advocates for you and help you through the whole process. And, you know, my wife, Landon, this is her heart work. I mean, she cares so much about kids, and we will do anything to help you guys. And, you know, if you've got information for Franklin Police, please reach out to them. No little bit of information is too stupid to pass on, because they need to piece together 20 years of what this guy has done. I don't think what was found on that phone will likely end up being the whole story. I think that this is somebody who's been here 20 years, and I would wager to guess that he's probably been doing this for a long time. So Franklin Police, their phone number is 615-794-2513. And as a community, let's band together, make sure everybody knows, and that we really unite and say, we're going to do everything possible to stop this. And when the next session comes around in the legislature, I'm counting on everybody's support for a bill to increase our penalties for these predators to be the most strict in the nation.
Great stuff. We appreciate the Starbucks, both you and Landon, and I thank you for coming on today, Robby. We'll talk again very soon.